Hello and welcome to Professor Weird's Weird Record Club. My name's Paul Weatherhead, but some call me Professor Weird. Now, in this channel, we're going to explore the unexplored, the records that get neglected, probably for good reason, by all the other channels out there. We're going to look at the weird, the wonderful, the oddball, the mad, the horrible, the humorous, the novelty, the psychedelic, and all that kind of weird stuff. So, in this episode, we are going to look at Uri Geller, the album. So Uri Geller was an Israeli psychic stroke magician, and he burst onto English television screens in the early 70s with his amazing superpower. Now, Superman can fly, and other superheroes have X-ray vision and all that kind of thing. Now, Uri's superpower was bending spoons with his mind, and he would hold them in his hands, rub them gently like this, and the spoon would magically bend in front of the astonished audience. And he invited people at home to do the same thing, and it sent children everywhere running for the cutlery drawers to try this out. And I remember doing this in the early 70s in front of my astonished family, where I'd rub the spoon very gently and it would somehow melt like butter before their very eyes. Now, I did it the same way that Uri did. I cheated. You bend it when no one's looking and then pretend it's happening in front of their eyes. And it's a very easy trick to master. There'll probably be loads of tutorials about it on YouTube. But anyway, spoon bending was Uri's superpower, and let's hope he never uses that for evil. So let's get onto the album, Uri Geller's album. This came out in 1975, and he worked with a couple of composers on it. So Uri wrote the lyrics, and the music was written by, first half of it was written by Byron Janis. He's a really well-known Chopin expert and performer, pianist. So he says in his autobiography that the reason why he worked on this album was that Uri Geller had helped him to contact the spirit of Chopin. The way they'd done this was Byron Janis and Uri Geller and some friends had got hold of Chopin's death mask, that sort of plaster cast they make of the corpse's face. And they were holding the death mask and trying to contact Chopin's spirit when the masks suddenly began to cry. So tears formed in its eyes and bubbles of saliva came out from its mouth. And Byron Janis tasted some of the tears and said they were salty. So if you're wondering what made Chopin's spirit weep and drool, it could well have been this album. Anyway, that was Byron Janis. The other composer who wrote half the music was Del Newman, and he was a very well-known arranger. He was arranger to the stars. He's worked with Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Paul Simon, a number of other people. Who else was it? Elton John, Donovan. So, with these on his side, the music sounds very well recorded. It's very orchestral, quite acoustic in the most part. Lots of swelling strings, sometimes they weep and groan. Very emotional orchestration, but the lyrics are written by Uri, and sometimes, he comes across as a kind of there's a very hippy-dippy cosmic vibe to the lyrics, and it's almost as if he's trying to hypnotize us in places. And sometimes it sounds like a cross between Donovan and Charles Manson. Now, Uri doesn't sing, he just recites his lyrics, and there's a lot of stuff like, imagine yourself in deep, deep velvet black space, like this, waves of space. And so there's a lot of that, and occasionally there's a couple of songs by a singer called Maxine Nightingale, and she sings beautifully. The lyrics, though, are a bit cosmic. They're all almost as if you're trying to be hypnotized, as I said. Now, I think the most interesting song on side one is the last one, and that's called "A Day," and that's very Aphrodite's child. It's sort of Uri intones sort of apocalyptic visions about the don't know, the aftermath of a nuclear war or something. So it sounds a bit like Aphrodite's Child 666, if you're familiar with that prog rock concept album about the end of the world. So that's interesting, because it's got, instead of the orchestration, you've got lots of squidgy, burbling synth noises. So that gives it a different flavour to the rest of the album. Now, when we get to side 2, on the second song, which is called The Lonely Man, Uri almost starts singing. He gives up talking and suddenly starts trying to hit the notes. And if that doesn't make your spoons bend, it will certainly make your toes curl. It's not pretty. I can imagine the producer there banging on the window telling him, don't sing. So now, if you want to bend spoons, you've got to wait right till the last song on the album, which is called Mood. And in this song, in this spoken word monologue, you've got the strings weeping and swelling and groaning, and Uri tells you to pick up a nearby object, perhaps a key, perhaps a spoon, to hold it in your hand, and he tells you to use your mind and tell it to bend. And it goes on like that for some time. But, you know, he left out one important part of the instructions, and that is to cheat. So anyway, that's the album. It's quite interesting. It's quite fun to listen to. I don't know whether I'll ever going to listen to it more than once or twice. If you look on the inside gatefold, you've got the lyrics on one side there. On the other side, you've got a couple of pictures there of Uri at work with one of the components. I think that's Byron Janis, and there with the other composer, Del Newman and Maxine Nightingale, who sings a couple of the songs. You've also got a photo here of Uri with Professor John Taylor from the University of London, King's College. So John Taylor was a mathematician and a physicist, and he tested Uri Geller's powers. And there's a letter here saying that he is convinced Uri is 100% genuine. He is not a fraud. He bends spoons with his mind. No trickery involved, because of course a very intelligent, well qualified expert on mathematics and physics could never be fooled by a cheap conjuring trick. Or could he? Well, the history of physicists and their involvement with spiritualist mediums in the 19th and early 20th century tells another story. Anyway, interestingly, Professor John Taylor, you can see here, he conducted an experiment with about 38 people who could, mostly children, who claimed they could bend metal with their minds. And he put them in a room with some metal, and they all bent metal with their minds, except when they were being observed. For some reason, whenever they were observed, the Geller effect, as it was called, this bending spoons with your mind was called the Geller effect. Whenever they were observed, it didn't happen. Funny that. So anyway, of course, John Taylor came up with an explanation. He called it the shyness effect. Now, another believer in Geller, who was a sociologist called Henry Collins from the University of Bath, he set up a similar experiment, but this time he observed the children through a one-way mirror. And guess what? They all cheated. So, anyway, I think that's all we can say about Uri Geller's strange album here. There is a warning on the back, which was quite nice. It says that Polydor, Uri Geller and all parties that have been hitherto involved take on no responsibility for the experiments and their consequences. So, in other words, if your spoons start bending, don't sue us. So, anyway, there you have it, Uri Geller, the album. And that's all from me. So, join me again soon for another walk on the weird side in the Weird Record Club. Bye-bye.